Hello, and welcome to our Swiss insurance overview with Jenny of Inswift Insurance. I'm Arielle Tucker. I'm the founder and lead planner at Connected Financial Planning, which is a financial planning firm for U.S. citizens living in or moving to Switzerland. You can find all my information on connectedfinancialplanning.com. But today I've invited Jenny here with us to just go over Swiss insurance. Jenny, I'll allow you to introduce yourself directly.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Jenny Goodwin. I own Inswift, which is an independent brokerage company. We've been going for just over 15 years now, and our main clientele is new arrivals in Switzerland and expats in general. As you can hear, I'm English, so we can help people to understand the system in English, and then we can help you help to sign up for products and different insurance policies based on your needs and wants at that time.
Yeah, and full disclosure, our family has been using Inswift since 2011 when we first moved to Switzerland, and I was trying to figure out the different insurances. As you can tell, I'm originally from the US, originally from upstate New York. And so I was trying to navigate all of this and just finding it completely overwhelming. And so a colleague had recommended Jenny, so we got connected. And so I feel very lucky that our family has been able to utilize your services and just try to navigate all this stuff, because it is so different than the US system, that there is a bit of an educational curve. And so really, thank you for agreeing to just have this conversation with me today, because the whole point of this is to have a conversation about different types of insurance in Switzerland, what's available, what's mandatory, what do expats need to be considering when they are moving in or living in Switzerland, just to help set that foundation for them.
It's something that we hear a lot as well. A lot of people find it quite overwhelming when they arrive. So we're here to try and make that process as painless as possible. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll go to our first slide here. Oh, I see. Okay, so we're going to go over the three categories of insurance. So I think we should start here with what is the mandatory or the compulsory insurance in Switzerland?
So basic health insurance is compulsory. And that's, as you can see, in French we call it la mal, in German KVG. You'll sometimes see these abbreviations. This is compulsory for all residents. So whether you're working or not, whether you're a child, an adult, as long as you're living in Switzerland, then you have to have basic health insurance. You also have to have accident insurance. So this is either included on your basic health insurance or it's provided by your employer. So that part as well is compulsory. Third-party liability insurance, people often think it's compulsory for everybody. It actually isn't, but it is if you own a dog and if you own a drone over a certain weight. And vehicle liability insurance is compulsory if you own a vehicle, which probably is the same everywhere in the world. In some cantons, we have to have contents insurance for natural hazards. So by that we mean fire, floods, those kind of things. But that's specific to which canton you'd be living in. Those are the only ones which are compulsory.
I'm curious because I didn't know about the natural hazards insurance that for contents. Is that for if you just own a home, or is that everyone?
It depends which canton you live in. So in Zurich, it's not compulsory for either. I live in the canton of Vaud, which is along Lake Geneva. So in our canton, it's compulsory for both content and buildings. So if you're a homeowner, you have to have it for the building. And as anybody that lives in my canton, you have to have it for your content. But that's very specific to this canton.
Yeah, okay. And one thing I think it's important to note is when you move into Switzerland, right, health insurance I think is the first need that most people think about. Amazing. So when you move into Switzerland, even if you don't have your health insurance on the day that you move in, maybe you get it 2 weeks later, it's backdated to the date that you arrived in Switzerland, correct?
That's correct. So that means that the premiums and the cover is backdated to the date that you arrive. So you have 90 days to show proof of insurance. So it doesn't have to be done on the day you arrive, but we recommend that people try to get it done as sooner rather than later, because these things can take a few weeks to come through. But yes, both the cover and the premiums are backdated to the day you arrive in Switzerland.
Okay. And then accident insurance, I know you mentioned that it's covered by the employer, or most often is covered by the employer, but I often see where we maybe have one spouse that is working and one spouse that isn't working. So the spouse that's working would have their own accident insurance through their employer, and the spouse that's at home or not working outside of the home would have to purchase an accident insurance policy separately. Is that correct?
That's pretty much correct, yes. So the basic insurance, you take it out either with or without accident insurance included in it. So if you have an employer, it's without. If you don't have an employer, you take it with. And the ruling is 8 hours per week for the same employer. So if you're working for 8 hours or more for the same employer per week, your employer has the legal obligation to cover you for accidents. Any less than that, then you have to cover it yourself. So people that are not working, stay-at-home mums or stay-at-home dads, children, sounds silly to say, but they don't have an employer, so therefore they need their own accident insurance. If you're retired, if you're independent as well, so you could be working but not for an employer, those people would need accident insurance on their basic health insurance.
Okay, great. Let's go to the next. Yes, the third-party liability insurance. I know that this is something that when we moved into our current property, so we rent a house in Zurich, and when we moved in, as part of our contract with our landlord, this was mandatory that we had our own third-party liability insurance. Do you want to talk a little bit about what third-party liability insurance is?
Sure, and it's quite an interesting one because people often do think it's compulsory or mandatory as a general rule, but it isn't. But landlords, landladies, estate agents that are renting properties to you like you to have this insurance in place, and so it's almost becoming mandatory because of the way the rental system works here. What it covers is any damage that you may cause to a third party, whether it be corporal or material. And generally we would cover you up to, or you would be covered up to 5 million francs, which sounds huge. But that's kind of a standard amount to be insured for. And so why do homeowners that you're renting from like you to have this insurance? It's because the floors and the doors and the windows of the property that you're renting don't belong to you. They belong to the homeowner. So they belong to a third party. So if you were to drop a hammer on a parquet flooring and cause a hole accidentally, then it's your third-party liability insurance which would cover the repairs to the floor.
Okay, great. And one of the things that I always think about these stories, I remember when we first moved to Switzerland, someone, maybe it was you, I don't know, was talking about key insurance. And that's separate from the liability insurance, correct? Where I think when we were talking about this before, the key insurance, if you live in a large apartment building, if you were to lose your keys, they might have to change the locks on every entry building or every entry door for the whole building and reissue all of those keys, which can be quite expensive. Is that covered in the liability insurance, or is that's a separate?
No, it'd be more in the contents.
Okay.
The contents part, which we'll come on to later. That would be more in the contents part. Third-party liability is although some people often call it rental insurance or renter's insurance, but it covers a lot more than that. So if I go to see a friend and I spill coffee over their computer and the computer's damaged and no longer works, my third-party liability insurance would pay for a new computer for my friend because I've unintentionally damaged their property. So it's third party. If I spilt coffee on my own computer, it wouldn't cover it because there's no third party involved. So there has to be the concept of somebody else, and whether that damage be corporal or material. That's what it's used for. So it's not only renters insurance or for rental properties. It could be in any part of your daily life.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So we'll keep going to our next point. Okay, and then the recommended, which I guess, again, are not mandatory, but
Correct.
I know our family has some supplementary health insurance. So why don't we talk a little bit more about that?
So supplementary health insurance complements the basic health insurance, which has some limitations. So it either covers things that the basic insurance doesn't cover at all, or it covers things that the basic insurance only covers up to a certain point. So it's recommended to have in place because it could cover, for example, hospitals out of canton, or it could cover additional transport costs. Those are things that the basic insurance would cover partially. Things that the supplementary could cover that the basic doesn't cover at all would be alternative medicines. For example, if you want to see an osteopath or a Chinese medicine practitioner, it would cover those kind of things. Or it can also help with promotion, like give you money towards a gym membership to help encourage that. They call that prevention. So it can cover all those types of things. There's a million different things we can get covered in supplementary. Glasses as well used to be covered by the basic for adults. It's no longer covered. You'd have to have supplementary insurance to have a contribution towards your glasses.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like the basic insurance is really basic, and it's really like basically the same price from all insurance providers. Is that correct?
Not quite. So it's the same price for the same policy regardless of age once you're 26. So if you're 26 or 106 and you've gone for this policy and in Zurich, then this is how much you would pay. And that's the same price for everybody. It's like a solidarity social insurance. So any money that goes into the pot has to go out of the pot to pay for care and medication and hospitalizations, etc. The supplementary, on the other hand, is I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
The supplement, I mean, I know that the supplementary plan, it spans the cost, right? You can really pick and choose what you want. I'm just thinking about things our family has. I know we have supplementary insurance, which covers an acupuncturist that I go to see, or cranial therapy, or we get money back for our children doing swim lessons, right? They cover some things like that. So
under promotion, prevention, and another important factor as well is orthodontic braces for children.
Yep.
It's not covered by the basic insurance, so it's really expensive here. So that's something to really consider in supplementary as well.
That's a great point, because that's something that you have to get into the policy by a certain age. Is that correct? The orthodontic
before
care?
you know that you need it. So we recommend for children that they get it, because it could easily just be that you go to the dentist for a general checkup and they say, oh, you might need orthodontics in 2 or 3 years. You need to have that cover in place already. And it's generally part of a package, of a supplementary package. You can get all sorts in there. So
Yeah. And I think this is where it takes an expert to try to help you whittle down what do you need, what will you use, what is just extra fluff that doesn't add
and also
a ton of value.
The basic insurance, because it's compulsory and it's governed by these laws, LAMAL and KVG, the cover is identical wherever you go. So the premium might not be, but the cover is. So if company A covers this medication or this doctor, they will all cover it. If it doesn't cover any, none of them will. Supplementary is different. It's a different law which governs this. It's LCA or VVG. And this, because it's not compulsory, the health insurance companies can put the cover they want. So perhaps your insurance covers 80 or 90% for your acupuncture, but another company might only cover 70% or give you 75 francs towards it, or not cover it at all. It depends. So what we try to do is look at individuals or families' needs, their specific needs, and you can kind of choose the company based on what works best for you in their supplementary, because the cover for the basic is the same everywhere.
Okay, great. Let's keep moving on. So we talked a little bit about the health insurance already. So just the legal obligation, and it is retroactive. I think it is also important to talk about the contract duration and how that works, changing providers.
So it's always a calendar year. They do everything here till the 31st of December. So the basic insurance, it's always a 1-year contract. You can change it every year. And you have to give them notice by the end of November. So we've put 30th of November, but last year it was the 29th, because I think the 30th was a Saturday, but it's the last working day in November. So you can change your... I think I've cut out again.
I hear the ambulance on the street.
Oh,
You're
that
here.
may be why it cut out, yeah. So yeah, the basic insurance, you can make any changes as long as you let them know by the end of November for the following calendar year. And that could include changing your deductible or excess, which we can come on to, or changing company. So you can change it every year. The premiums change every year. In theory, they could go up or down. In practice, they always go up. And the last few years, as you will remember, we've seen quite an increase. The last 2 or 3 years, it's been quite harsh. So a lot of people have been changing for the new calendar year.
Okay. And the other thing, maternity care. Now, if I remember, if you move into Switzerland and you're already pregnant, you can only get the basic insurance. Is that correct? Or can you still potentially get the supplementary as well?
You can get supplementary, but it won't cover this particular pregnancy. So the basic insurance will cover so even if you arrive in Switzerland, you register, and the next day you give birth, the costs of that birth, as long as you're in a public hospital in your canton of residence, will be covered 100%. Which is
it's just all but there's you wouldn't get like the private room or all the other. Yeah. So I think it is important to know, because we do have a lot of families who are moving into Switzerland. Like if you are already pregnant and you're making that move, you may not be able to get the supplementary insurance to cover additional, like the supplementary.
Correct. Because it would kind of be considered as a pre-existing condition in that case. So it wouldn't cover this pregnancy, but if you signed up for private rooms, for example, private hospitalisation, it would cover any future pregnancies, but not this particular one.
Okay. Great. We'll go to the next slide. And then the supplementary duration. Oh, you know what? I'm looking at your slide and I see contract duration max 3 years. I didn't realize that. And it also looks like there's a different cancellation deadline. Do you want to talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. Because we're now into the kind of private part, because each company can offer the cover they want, they can offer the premiums they want, etc. They're obviously all going to try and remain competitive with what they offer. But here you could have a 1-year contract on your supplementary, you could have a 3-year, you could even have a 5-year contract. It's a bit technical, but there's been a change in the LCA law recently, so you can get out of these policies after 3 years. But it's good to check what you've signed up for. Sometimes people have signed up for 3 years and they don't realise that they've signed up for 3 years. And also the deadline to cancel is 3 months before the end of the year, which is 30th of September or last working day of September.
Okay, great. And I think one thing I want to note here for the supplementary coverage is emergency abroad. I think it was last ski season, our family was in Austria, and our daughter, I remember, I think we called you to panic because our daughter had a ski accident and had to take an ambulance to the local St. Anton's hospital, which is like the smallest hospital in the world, I think, with a broken ankle or something. So, I was really thankful that we had that additional coverage outside of Switzerland. I think that's a really important one for families, especially those who are traveling a lot.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's not particularly costly part of the supplementary insurance. So some companies will include it as part of their supplementary package. With some companies, we have to add it on. And with those companies that we have to pay extra to have it for a child, you're looking at 1 to 2 francs a month. It's nothing.
Yeah.
Part. But if something were to happen abroad, like it happened to you, then it's important to have that cover in place. Just wanted to pick up as well on a point about coverage abroad, is that we're talking about emergencies. It's different if you choose to be. If you say, I've met this really good knee surgeon in Austria and I want him to operate on my knee, that's not the same as an emergency abroad. So that's elective treatment abroad, which can be covered by some providers. It's not the general thing that is covered, but and it can be quite a costly part of supplementary insurance to include, but it is possible to have that. But emergency abroad is for the general, you know, we go on holiday once or twice a year abroad, things happen, you know, ski accident or, you're not feeling well or something like that, and that would cover those medical costs there.
And one other point on the ski accidents, which are so prevalent in Switzerland. We've had a couple of friends who ended up being lifted off the mountain by helicopter. And if you're skiing in Switzerland, you'll see those helicopters flying back and forth all day. And that is not covered in basic insurance. And so if you are an avid skier, I would recommend having insurance either through Rega or a supplementary policy to make sure that's covered, because otherwise you will get a bill for that.
When we say transport here, we you know, ambulances obviously, but we also talk about helicopters. And it's funny because you're right, we do see so many helicopters in the mountains, but we don't necessarily see that many ambulances in towns, and that's because they're so expensive. So people will, I've noticed compared to the UK, certainly we are less likely to phone an ambulance in the case of an emergency. In the UK, we don't think about it, but here you would kind of think a little bit more about before calling them. There is some cover in the basic insurance, but it's not huge. So that's one of the main reasons, not main reasons, but it's a good reason for taking out supplementary for sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we'll get to accident insurance.
So again, it's a legal obligation if you're not employed. And this cut-off date is well, the cut-off is 8 hours a week, which I'm not sure where they've come up with that from. But so if you're employed, say you work 4 hours a week for 3 different employers. So you work 12 hours a week, but you do 4 hours for each employer. Those employers have the legal obligation to cover you for accidents at work. So if you have an accident while you're at work, they will also cover you for going to and from work. So if you have an accident on your way to work to that particular job, that would cover. But what it won't cover is what we call non-professional accidents. So accidents when you're away from work, for example, skiing on a Sunday or playing football, or any kind of accident that could happen when you're not at work. If you're working 8 hours or more for the same employer, their accident insurance will also cover you for accidents when you're not at work, which is often quite surprising to people. So,
yeah, I know that you've gone through the saga with us where my husband he was eating Migros muesli and chipped a tooth, and it was thankfully covered by our accident insurance because the dental bill was like $4,000, and this would not at all be covered by the dental insurance. This was an accident. Yes. And so it's really important to make sure you have that coverage in place.
Absolutely. So if you don't have an employer when you're coming over, for example, if you're what we call trailing spouse, or if you're coming over to be independent, freelance, then it's even more important to get supplementary insurance, or to really look at your accident insurance, because an accident by definition can happen to anybody at any time, so it's important to have that cover in place. Just one small thing as well there is there's a difference between accident insurance as an employee and as somebody who's taken out their own, because as an employee there's also a loss of earnings aspect in there, which you wouldn't have on a individual basis. So if you break your leg and you can't work for 3 months, then there'll be a loss of earnings aspect that will be paid through the employer, and that's part of their accident insurance.
Oh, that's a really good point. So is the self-employed individual, is that something that someone could add that into their policy, or?
Yeah, so we couldn't add it into this policy. We couldn't add it into a health insurance policy, but we could take out a separate policy for loss of earnings. And at that point, the freelance person could decide to take it out just in the case of an accident, or in the case of an accident or an illness.
Okay, great. Okay, then home insurance.
Yeah, we talked quite a bit about third-party liability. There's another word on there which people will like. It says inexpensive That's inexpensive on a Swiss level. So you're probably, for a family, you're probably talking about 150 francs a year, which is on a Swiss level, that's kind of, yeah, it's inexpensive, and it's a no-brainer really to take it out for what it covers. It's great.
And I mean, and I think we were talking about this a little bit before, where it covers the whole family, and potentially
So if
could
there's
cover
two
them
of you or 10 of you,
abroad
then
as well.
it's the same price.
But for
Did I cut out?
Yep, I think that's
Sorry.
really important. You're good. So it's titled under home insurance, but really I think about third party liability insurance. For me, this is like a no brainer for our clients. Everyone should have this insurance because it's so cheap compared to the coverage, especially. And then again, it is compulsory for dog owners or drone owners.
Yeah.
And then we have the household contents insurance, which we like to call, if you don't own a home, we call that like rental insurance.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit because this is where the key insurance would come into play, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah. Loss of keys, for example, could be in there. The more common parts of the home contents insurance would be, it says there, fire and natural damage. That's for those cantons that don't have it as a legal obligation. You could take that out in your contents policy. So if you were to lose all your belongings in a fire, then you would need that. Also theft as well. So if somebody breaks into your home, burglary, you would need that cover to cover your home contents. And there's something which we call theft away from the home, which is quite interesting. And that's for items which are normally found within the home, but are with you for one reason or another outside of the home. Last week I had the case, a client had been skiing and they stopped for a cup of tea and he came out and his skis had been stolen. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know how he got back, but so the skis were covered on his home contents insurance because we'd included that part of theft away from the home. So that's quite an interesting thing to include. There's also something called all risk cover. We sometimes use the word casco, which is not an English word, it comes from the German, and it means damage that you would cause to your own belongings. Could be something that's important to include.
Like if I accidentally set fire to my iPhone, is that like what is that? What's an example of that?
You drop your iPhone in the bath.
You drop your iPhone, okay.
That would be all risk or cover, or casco, as some companies call it. People with toddlers tend to take this cover out because we tend to hear stories of footballs being kicked through TVs and general toddler behaviour. So that could be interesting. The example I like to use is with a camera. For example, if I own a nice camera and I lend it to you because you'd like to take some nice photographs of the mountain, and you break my camera, it's your third-party liability insurance which will replace my camera because you've damaged a third party's property. If somebody breaks into my home and steals my camera, it's my contents insurance, the burglary part, that would cover the theft of the camera. If I'm out and about on a train and somebody steals my camera when I'm on the train, it's the theft away from the home which would cover the replacement of the camera. And if I break my own camera, if I drop it in the bath or something, then it would be my all risk or casco cover that would cover damage to my own camera. So that's kind of one example of how damage to that particular camera would be covered by different parts of the insurance.
Okay, that's a great example. One thought that popped into my head while you were explaining that was bikes. What about bikes? Do you need a supplementary policy on top of household contents insurance, or is that generally covered?
It's generally covered, so it depends on the bike, and it depends.
And I'm thinking everyone has e-bikes, right? And those e-bikes
have e-bikes these days, yeah.
Which are now a couple $1,000s. It's not like $1,000 bike. It's
and even bike fanatics. I have clients who have 8,000 to 10,000 franc bikes. So that's interesting. It's an interesting thing because insurance companies traditionally don't really like bikes because they're easy to steal, they break easily. So they're not something that an insurance company particularly likes. So if the bike is stolen from your home, it would be part of the general contents, so it would be covered under the theft or burglary part of your home contents. If it's stolen while you're away from the home, then it's the theft away from the home part which would cover it. And if you were to damage your bike while riding it, then it would be the all risk part. But a lot of companies have separate bike insurance that you can take out for specifically for your bike or for your e-bike. But you're right, more and more people have it here. They're very popular in Switzerland, bikes and e-bikes. So it's something to consider. If you have a bike, for example, which is worth 8,000 francs, I would suggest taking a separate policy for that bike rather than increasing the amount for theft away from the home.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so then we're going to get to vehicle insurance.
One tiny bit again on e-bikes, on those policies, you can get like breakdown cover for your e-bike.
I didn't know that.
So if the battery breaks and you're in the middle of nowhere or something, they can come and pick you up with your bike and take you home. So those policies can cover that as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. Okay, so we'll get to vehicle insurance because, and we were talking a little bit about this, probably like 20 years ago, a lot of US expats were trying to bring their cars, right? If their company were giving them kind of an expat package, their car transport might have been included as part of that. So I want to talk a little bit about importing your car, what are the considerations, and then also just kind of more general, because a lot of expats are either kind of relying on public transportation here for a while and then eventually saying, you know what, I want to be able to get to the mountains faster. I'm just going to go ahead and buy a car.
Yeah, if you're living in the centre of town and you're not a mountain person, then most people will use the public transport systems, which are very good here. But yeah, a lot of people have their own vehicles. So if you buy the vehicle here, it's a little bit different than if you're importing it. If you are looking to import it, then we would suggest that people keep the insurance that they've already got on the vehicle, because the importation process can take a while. So that would be important to that. Best to probably contact myself or another insurance agent if you're looking to do that, because it can get a bit technical. But for general cars, the third party liability is a legal requirement. So that, again, like the private liability insurance, if you damage another vehicle, that's what third-party vehicle liability would cover. And you would be covered for 100 million francs, which sounds huge, and it is. And I've yet to see a case where it goes anywhere near that. But if you caused a pile-up on the motorway with 15 Porsches that are all completely damaged, then, the amount could go quite high quite quickly where cars are concerned. So again, yeah, third-party car insurance covers damage to other people's vehicles, and it's compulsory if you own a car. You can add on what we call partial casco. Again, this odd word, this casco. This would cover in the UK we would call it third party fire and theft, something like that. So it would cover fire if the vehicle catches on fire, parking damage you can get included in there. If the vehicle if you break the windscreen, something like that, or if it gets stolen. Natural elements, animals. So by animals, it could be either animals. We have these rodents in Switzerland that really love brake cables. So they're often cover for, they're called martins, and they like to chew through brake cables. It's like their favourite thing. So it's good to get that insurance included. But also if you hit an animal, while driving through the countryside and it damages the car, I'm trying to think of the English word, carrosserie, the outside of the car, then that would be a partial casco that would cover that. And then the final part to it to kind of get full cover would be casco, what we call full casco, and that's collision. So if you had a collision with another vehicle and it was your fault, your third party liability insurance would cover the damage to the other person's vehicle, and it's your collision cover that would cover the damage to your own vehicle. So if you don't have that collision cover, then cover to the other person's vehicle, fine, that's covered under the third party, but there's no cover for yourself.
Yeah, so that I think it's really, you need to have a thoughtful, do we have a really cheap car that we could self-insure?
Yeah. Is it worth taking it out?
$3,000, yeah, it probably is. If it's a cheap car, probably isn't worth the full collision. If you have a nice car, cars are really expensive, 40, 50, 60, 100 grand. and you don't want to self-insure that, then that collision needs to be part of the equation for sure.
Yeah, and if you buy a car on a lease, because a lot of people take these cars on these leasing agreements, then the full casco cover with the collision, that's compulsory. You have to have that because the car technically doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the leasing company. But if you own your own car outright, then yeah, you can. Yeah, you have to take that. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're getting to the miscellaneous insurance, which I have so many thoughts about this. So, pet insurance.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts here on the pet insurance?
So, like a lot of things in
just lost you
Switzerland,
for a
vets
second.
are quite expensive. I think we may have cut out again.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Yeah, saying like a lot of things in Switzerland, vets are quite expensive. So it's good to have pet insurance to cover the cost of a vet, just like your health insurance would cover the cost of your doctor. And again, there's prevention that you can incorporate. So the annual jabs, the annual vaccines that you would get for your cat or your dog, they can be included in the insurance. The premiums for this part have gone up quite a bit over the last few years, and I think that it's usually a knock-on effect because of the costs of vets, things like that. But I lost my cat a couple of years ago, and he had pet insurance, and the last sort of 12 months, you're really glad to have it in place, especially that last 12 months where there was MRIs going on and blood tests, and he had to stay in the little pet hospital overnight, and there was all things like that happening. So, and all that was covered by the insurance. So I was really happy to have it there. And when things like that happen as well, you know, cats and dogs are part of the family. So you've got other things on your mind than will this bill be covered, and so it's great to have it in place for that.
Yeah, I always recommend clients who are moving in and their pets are younger, it's something to explore, right? If you're moving in with an older pet, you may not even be able to get it.
But yeah, you're right. So we can take it out for pets that are aged between 3 months and 7 years.
Okay.
If your cat's already 10 when you move to Switzerland, unfortunately we can't insure them. The premiums will also increase with age for pet insurance.
Yep. Okay, travel insurance. We talked a little bit about this, but this is something I tell pretty much all of our clients to look into, either as a supplementary to their health insurance. This is so important because one of the things you'll also see in some travel insurances is it might not cover the US or it might not cover other regions. So it's really important that if you know you're traveling, or it might not cover more than, 3 months in a country if you get stuck somewhere. So it's really important to understand what your travel insurance is actually covering and make sure that it meets the needs that you actually have.
Yeah, and it covers other aspects as well, because the medical costs are generally would be covered under the health insurance, but it's good to make sure you know exactly what you've got. Because it's covered under the supplementary part of the health insurance, this may affect your choice of provider, because if you're somebody that goes to the US quite a lot, which is an expensive country compared to the surrounding countries of Switzerland, for example, then you might want to make sure you've got good cover abroad for health emergencies. And the travel here, in this type of policy, some companies call it assistance insurance. It covers cancellation costs. So if you can't travel due to a medical emergency, you break the leg the day before you're supposed to go on holiday, they would cover the cost of the flight or the hotels or the things that you can't cancel. It can also help once you're abroad. So if something happens while you're away and you have to come back early, or you have to change your plans, it would cover those kind of things. Also covers repatriation, stolen travel documents. It can cover all sorts of things there that could be deemed assistance, where you need help with something because something's happened to you and it's within the travel spectrum. Also, weirdly, because it's an assistance cover, if you take it out, it covers for things in Switzerland. So if you have concert tickets, for example, and you can't go and see this concert because there's a medical emergency, it would cover the cost of the concert tickets if you can't resell them or something like that.
Okay, yeah, great. I mean, I think just a good general travel. Most, U.S. expats are coming and they are looking forward to traveling a lot.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's the ease of travel is such a huge benefit for us.
Yeah,
Um,
and people often talk about credit cards as well, because if you book it on your credit card, there's cover on there. But for people that are looking to travel a lot, I would recommend this kind of policy, because you can get an annual policy for the whole family, and then you're not having to worry about it every time you go traveling. Whereas if you get it through the credit card, perhaps once you've booked through the credit card, it's covered, but the second time it might be booked in a different way, or you might forget, or I don't know. I think it's sometimes safer to take an annual policy.
Yeah, and I'll say what our family does. We actually have two policies, and one is through our US credit card. So we do pay a premium for our US credit card, and there is travel insurance with that US credit card. But
Okay.
something that I've noticed is that the cost of the credit card has increased and the coverage of that card has decreased. So the coverage is not as generous as it used to be, and it only covers travel on that we book on that card, which is basically just all of our US travel. And so we have this other supplementary travel insurance policy because I, will take the train to Paris. Well, I'm not going to use my US credit card to book that trip. That doesn't make sense. I
Yeah,
use my Swiss bank card to book those tickets on SBB, and that's all covered under my travel insurance. So I think it is important to recognize you may need two policies and they have different purposes.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about legal insurance. This to me is one of the best insurances for expats. I have used this so many times. I think it's also incredibly a reasonable policy. And I'll just give a couple examples. I've had legal questions with for my employer, reviewing contracts, or if they're telling me something and I'm like, that doesn't make sense, I will just submit that to the legal insurance lawyer and they will review and say, yes, this is kosher, this is not. You need to double check this. What they're trying to do doesn't make sense. Whenever we've moved into a new apartment, I've always had them review our contracts. I think legal insurance, it's a different system in Switzerland than we're used to in the U.S. Things just the rules are all different, and so I think it's really important to have a safe place to just say, I just need to ask some questions from a qualified lawyer. And I think 1 year of legal insurance is probably half of what a normal lawyer would charge you for 1 hour. So I think it's a great deal.
Yeah, traditionally, that's what we used to say. An annual premium is about an hour and a half with a lawyer. So, and lawyers never charge you for 1 hour.
Yeah.
They will always give you like a sort of, okay, well, this is going to take me 3 to 4 hours work. So it's like you have like a base to go off. Yeah, it covers anything, like you said, work contracts. That's a really good one. And I think it's just nice to have somebody on your side sometimes. Sometimes you just need some legal help. Not particularly help, but you can call up and say, this is what they've put. Does this sound right to you? And there are some things in Switzerland which are compulsory, like you have to take 2 weeks holiday together and things like that you may not know when you move here. And so it's important, or not important, but it's a really useful thing to have, is to have somebody in your corner to ask about those things, whether it be work contract or rental agreements. Perhaps your rent's going to go up and you think, why are they putting my rent up? And you can contact them and say that I've received this, does this sound right, can I contest it? And they can help you for all those kind of things. So it's any legal disputes. Could be with a contract, you have a problem with Swisscom, which is a telephone provider here, or with I don't know, anything really where any legal dispute could come up with a neighbour, or if you're a homeowner, for example, and they want to build on your land, and they say, well, this bit of land belongs to us, and you say, no, it belongs to us. There could be a legal dispute there. So it's really good to have those, to have that insurance in place. Like I say, to have kind of somebody in your corner and that can help you with those issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of the most underrated insurances in my opinion, and I tell all of our clients to consider getting it. And then we already talked a little bit about the all risk, but I think it is important when we're talking about valuables that a lot of people here have really nice watches, or we talked a little bit about bikes or musical instruments or art. And so why don't you talk a little bit about making sure that those investment pieces are covered?
Yeah, so you can insure those types of items on a separate, what we could call valuables policy. So if you're moving to Switzerland, for example, and you want to insure your contents, that would be a general amount, let's say 100,000 francs worth of contents for the family. For valuable objects, it's specific to each object that we're insuring. So you might have inherited a nice Rolex watch, for example, or have a particularly nice engagement ring, wedding ring, or an old violin which is worth thousands, a musical instrument, something like that. For these items, we can insure them separately on a valuables policy, and that will cover them, as we say, all risk. So if it's not under the exemptions in the terms and conditions, it's covered. So damage, water, accidental damage, wear and tear, things that are generally an exclusion from contents insurance could be covered here. But yeah, it's very specific. You'd need either the receipt that you bought it or a recent valuation. So I have clients who have several nice pieces of jewellery. We went to the jewellers, and the jewellers quite happy to evaluate every piece of jewellery. I think we may have cut out. No? The jeweller can evaluate every single piece of jewellery, and then we base the insurance on that evaluation. So we would need something like that. And sometimes you get asked for photographs as well. It's good to provide photos of these individual items.
Yeah, that's a great point.
If it's art and if it's older art, we can get art experts from the insurance companies can come round and evaluate them as well.
And you know what I always find interesting in Switzerland, and this is because I worked in tax first, and I was on the U.S. side, but my colleagues would be on the Swiss side, so we'd always see the Swiss tax returns. And for really valuable art or jewelry, those become part of the Swiss tax return, right? Because there's a wealth tax in Switzerland. And so oftentimes we'd look through these returns and we'd see pictures. Oh, this is their Picasso, and this is the valuation of the Picasso for the tax purposes. And so I do find that really interesting, how there's this interplay between like the consideration of valuables and then also the considerations for the tax considerations around that from a Swiss wealth tax perspective, because we don't have wealth tax in the United States. So I find the whole concept of it just very interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't think we have it in the UK so much, not in the same way that they have it here either. Yeah. So I hope those clients have got those items insured as well.
Yes, those should all be insured. If it's going on your tax return, it should be insured.
Yeah.
Jenny, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and just kind of go through the high level considerations of Swiss insurance and just helping us get more familiar with how it all works. On this slide, you'll be able to connect with both of us on Instagram. So Connected Financial Planning. I have Arielle Tucker Abroad. That's my my Instagram. And then you guys have the Inswift Instagram accounts. And so that's going to be a great way to stay connected with us, watch some old reels. I know, Jenny, you guys have done a great job at putting some really valuable content on your Instagram page.
Thanks.
So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, no problem. It was really nice. Speak to you soon.